The world's longest-lasting careers aren't built on the grind set. Instead, they use strategic laziness to ensure longevity. I recovered from severe burnout without quitting my business, and this is exactly how.
Wow.
Yeah. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to learn 10 strategies to achieve more by doing less, even if you feel guilty resting.
Which, honestly, most of us do.
Right. To figure out how to actually do this, we've pulled together a massive stack of sources today. We're looking at everything from neurobiology papers on cognitive fatigue to productivity blogs to interviews with CEOs who have successfully transitioned to 4-day work weeks. Our mission for this deep dive is to extract the absolute best, most practical methods to overhaul how you operate on a daily basis.
And we really have to start by completely shattering a myth. We have to stop glorifying exhaustion. I mean, I want you to imagine a car engine. The RPM needle is buried deep in the red.
Oh, yeah. We all know that feeling.
The heat radiating off the block is just intense. There's that sharp, acrid smell of burning oil, and thick gray smoke is pouring out from under the hood. The engine is screaming, giving everything it has. But if you look down at the tires, they're just spinning deep in the mud. The car is barely moving an inch.
Spinning its wheels.
Exactly. That is what the grind set does to you. Burnout is not a badge of honor. It's a sign of inefficiency. We have to permanently delete the belief that your value equals the hours you work.
That image of the smoking engine is painfully relatable. We've been conditioned to believe that if we aren't suffering, we aren't succeeding. So if we are tossing that belief out the window, where do we actually begin? Let's dive right into our first strategy, which is all about flipping a core concept.
The very first concept we need to tackle is viewing rest as a weapon. It requires a fundamental shift in how you view your downtime. Most people look at rest as the absence of work. They view it as a necessary evil, where they basically just doing nothing while waiting to work again.
Yeah, just killing time.
Right, but biologically and psychologically, that is completely false.
But how do we overcome that guilt? Like, if I'm sitting on the couch doing nothing, the voice in the back of my head is screaming that I'm falling behind my competitors.
You quiet that voice by looking at the science of growth. Think about what happens when you go to the gym. When you are lifting heavy weights, you are not actually building muscle in that moment. You are tearing the muscle fibers.
Breaking them down.
You are breaking them down, creating micro tears. If you just kept lifting 24/7, your muscles would eventually tear completely and fail. The actual growth, the synthesis of new, stronger tissue happens later when you are at home, fast asleep. So if you need a mental sticky note for this point, it's this. Recovery is when the growth happens.
Okay, that makes sense. You are weaponizing your rest so you can come back and lift heavier tomorrow, mentally speaking. That covers our first point about the mindset of rest. Let's logically move to our second point, which is about your physical environment. The sources refer to this as the hobby station.
This strategy is about intentionally designing your physical space. In our modern lives, we constantly blur the boundaries of our environments. We eat on the couch, we scroll our work emails in bed, we take conference calls at the kitchen counter.
I'm definitely guilty of the kitchen counter calls.
We all are. A hobby station means establishing a physical space in your home dedicated entirely and solely to recharging.
Now, I have to play the skeptic here for a second. An analog hobby station sounds incredibly relaxing, but let's be real. If someone lives in a tiny one-bedroom apartment or they have 3 kids running around, they can't exactly dedicate an entire sunroom to watercolor painting. How do the sources suggest we adapt this?
It doesn't have to be an entire room. It can be a specific chair or even a specific rug. The size of the space doesn't matter, the boundary does. Imagine the feeling of crossing an invisible threshold. The moment you cross that line or sit in that chair, the atmosphere changes. There is zero screen glare hitting your eyes.
Yeah.
There are no notification pings vibrating in your pocket. There is just the physical, tactile texture of a hobby. Maybe it's the smell of wet clay, or the rough friction of sandpaper on wood, or the soft, heavy weight of yarn in your hands. It is a strictly analog zone.
So it's really about the sensory shift.
Exactly. By removing the screens and the constant low-level threat of incoming work, you are signaling to your nervous system that it is safe to power down the executive function and engage in pure tactile presence. You are grounding yourself in the physical world.
So the hobby station protects our evenings and weekends. But what about when you are right in the middle of your workday and hitting a wall? That brings us to our third strategy, micro breaks. The biggest trap the sources identify here is the illusion of powering through.
Oh, we all know that feeling. Your eyes are glazing over, you are staring at a blinking cursor, your shoulders are practically touching your ears from tension, and you think, if I just sit here for 2 more hours, I will crack this.
Right. But let's say my boss is waiting on a draft. or a client is expecting a proposal by end of day. It feels impossible and, frankly, irresponsible to walk away in that exact moment.
It feels irresponsible, but powering through is actually what destroys your work quality. Powering through feels like productivity because you are suffering, and as we said earlier, we associate suffering with hard work. But what you are actually doing is destroying your hourly yield. Your cognitive load capacity diminishes sharply after sustained focus.
So what is the actual practical fix when the deadline is looming?
Here is the rule to live by. 5 minutes every hour. It sounds so simple, but the friction to actually do it is massive. In those 5 minutes, you must physically remove yourself.
Get away from the desk.
Get completely away. Stand up, look out a window at a distant horizon to change your focal depth, stretch, get a glass of water. You are essentially hitting the refresh button on your brain's RAM. When you sit back down, your processing speed is restored, and you will finish that draft faster than if you had just stared at the screen.
Okay, that covers the micro level of our days. Let's zoom out to the macro level.
Yeah.
Moving to our fourth strategy, we're looking at the concept of a digital Sabbath. And I know this one makes people incredibly anxious.
It does, because it directly attacks the always-on mentality. In the modern world, work doesn't end when you leave the office. It follows you home in your pocket. It buzzes against your leg during dinner. It lights up the nightstand while you are trying to sleep. This creates a state of chronic, low-grade hypervigilance. You are never, ever truly off-duty.
The fix the sources give us is 24 hours entirely offline every single week, a full 24-hour digital Sabbath. But again, to represent the listener here, what if my kid's school calls? What if there is a legitimate family emergency? Going completely dark for a full day feels reckless.
That is the most common hurdle. The key is triage versus chronic vigilance. You can set up your phone so that only emergency contacts like your kid's school or your spouse can break through a do not disturb barrier.
Ah, okay.
Everything else, social media, email, Slack, news alerts, is physically blocked.
And what actually happens to us when we do that?
The first few hours are uncomfortable. You will experience phantom vibrations in your pocket. You'll reach for your phone out of pure muscle memory just because you have a spare 3 seconds of silence waiting for a kettle to boil. But if you push through that withdrawal, something magical happens around hour 12. The background hum of anxiety finally switches off. You realize the world didn't end because you were unreachable for a day.
It sounds like stepping out of a loud factory that you didn't even realize was loud until the massive machinery suddenly shut down. The silence is deafening at first, but it is deeply restorative. All right, that was strategy 4. Pivoting to our 5th strategy, let's talk about vacations as strategy. Why do we fail at this? We let our annual leave days roll over, or we cash them out thinking we are too vital to the company to step away.
And that ties right back to the inefficiency of the smoking car engine. We wait until we are already burned out to try and plan a break. But when you are exhausted, researching hotels and booking flights feels like just another massive project on your to-do list, so you just don't do it.
So the fix the sources suggest is to book your trips exactly 6 months out, regardless of how you feel right now. The imagery they use for this is incredible. Can you break down the anchor metaphor?
Think of booking that trip as taking a heavy iron anchor and throwing it as far out into the future as you possibly can. Let's say 6 months down the line. That anchor sinks in and catches on a specific date on your calendar.
Got it.
Now, the rope is taut. No matter how turbulent the present gets, no matter how chaotic a specific Wednesday is, you have this massive physical date pulling you forward. You can feel the tension on the rope. You know relief is guaranteed.
It creates a psychological safety net. Okay, let's take a breath and quickly recap the first 5 tactics we've covered before we move into the second half. We flipped the concept to view rest as a weapon. We established physical boundaries with the hobby station. We implemented micro breaks, 5 minutes every hour. We discussed the massive reset of the 24-hour digital Sabbath. And we just covered vacations as strategy, throwing that anchor into the future.
Exactly. Those first 5 are really about structuring your physical and temporal boundaries. They are the defensive line against burnout.
Which brings us perfectly to our next set of strategies, which are much more psychological. Let's move to strategy number 6, the done list. So, what is the trap here that keeps us exhausted?
The trap is the constant feeling of inadequacy from staring at an endless to-do list. The traditional to-do list is inherently designed to make you feel like you are failing because it only ever shows you what you haven't accomplished yet.
Right, it's like a hydra. You cross off one task and 2 more immediately pop up in its place.
Precisely. Imagine you are hiking up a massive, steep mountain. The to-do list forces you to keep your neck craned upward, staring at a peak that is constantly hidden in the clouds. No matter how many steps you take, the peak never seems to get closer. You feel exhausted, demoralized, and incredibly small.
So the fix is the done list. You physically list out what you actually accomplished that day, but why does that work? How does that help us if the work still isn't finished?
Because you stop, you turn around, and you look back down the mountain. You shift your focus entirely from the mountain left to climb to the massive elevation you have already gained. By writing down, had a difficult conversation with a client, or completed the quarterly report draft, you're giving your brain the chemical reward of completion.
A dopamine hit.
Exactly. You are hacking your dopamine. You validate your own effort, which provides the actual neurochemical fuel needed to turn back around and keep climbing tomorrow.
That shift in perspective is huge. All right, navigating from the done list to our seventh strategy. Delegate or delete. The trap here is simple, being a control freak. We've all said it, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself.
Which is the ultimate ego trap. And it is the fastest track to severe burnout. You simply cannot scale your output or protect your peace if you refuse to scale your trust.
Okay, but let's talk about the reality of that. It is terrifying to let a project go out into the world with someone else's fingerprints on it. What if the formatting is slightly off? What if they don't use the exact phrasing I would use?
This is where we have to establish a hard rule. You only remember one thing from this point. Let it be this. 80% done by someone else is perfectly fine.
80%. That feels like settling for mediocrity.
It's not mediocrity, it's the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, applied to energy management. Getting a task from 0 to 80% good usually takes 20% of the total effort. But taking it from 80% good to 100% flawless perfection requires the remaining 80% of your energy.
That is a huge drain.
It is a massive, disproportionate energy drain. If you can let go of that obsession with the final polish, you unlock a staggering amount of leverage. You let someone else get it to 80%, you accept that it is good enough for its intended purpose, and you reallocate your saved energy to high-level strategy.
Wow. Accept the 80% and save your energy for the big picture. Okay, that covers strategy 7. Let's jump into strategy 8, which is actually one of my favorites. The tactic is simply play.
This is one that adults really struggle with. We fail here because we take life and our careers entirely too seriously. Everything has a metric, an ROI, a purpose, a goal.
It's true, even our hobbies become side hustles. We can't just knit a sweater, we have to start an online shop to sell the sweaters.
And when everything has an ROI, the brain gets locked into a very rigid, linear mode of processing. It becomes highly efficient at executing known tasks, but terrible at generating new solutions. The fix is unstructured fun. True play, where the only goal is the activity itself.
I read the part in the sources about the default mode network activating during play, but honestly, that felt a little dense. Can we break down what that actually means for our brains?
Absolutely. Think of your brain's focused attention like a tight spotlight. It's great for reading a spreadsheet, but when you engage in play, like building a ridiculous fort out of couch cushions with your kids, or trying to paint a watercolor when you have absolute zero artistic talent and just laughing at it, you turn off that tight spotlight.
So you widen the beam.
Yes. That allows the default mode network to kick in. It's basically your brain's background processing state. It starts connecting completely unrelated ideas. The walls of your rigid thinking come down.
Is that why we always get our best ideas in the shower, or when we are just throwing a tennis ball against a wall?
Exactly. You finally gave your brain the slack it needed to innovate. Stepping away for pure, unstructured play is the secret backdoor to increasing creativity.
So go play, unapologetically. We are on to our 9th strategy, and this one is about understanding your energy. The sources call it emotional fuel.
We often treat our energy like a single homogeneous battery. We think of it purely in terms of physical exhaustion. If the battery is low, we sleep for 8 hours, and theoretically the battery should be full. But energy is deeply emotional. The mistake we make is filling our days exclusively with tasks that drain us, and then wondering why sleep doesn't fix the deep fatigue.
I noticed the sources made a really interesting distinction here about our energy. They don't view it as a battery at all. They used a metaphor about a leaky bucket. Can you explain how that works?
Think of your energy as water. Doing tasks that you absolutely hate, like endless administrative data entry or arguing with a toxic client, is like pouring water into a leaky bucket. You are putting physical effort in by sitting there trying to focus, but the emotional drain means the water is just pouring right out the bottom. The bucket is always empty. You finish an 8-hour day of spreadsheets feeling completely hollowed out.
So the fix is actively seeking out emotional fuel.
Yes. When you do something you genuinely love, maybe it's mentoring a junior team member or getting deep into the creative flow of designing a new pitch, it's not pouring water into a leaky bucket. It's like turning on a high-pressure fire hose of fresh water. Even if you work a 12-hour day, if you're turning on that fire hose, you walk away feeling a buzz. You feel more energized than when you started. You have to audit your week and ensure you are scheduling activities that turn on the fire hose, not just spending your life patching a leaky bucket.
If you don't schedule those fire hose activities, the draining tasks will just expand to fill every available minute. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground. And that brings us to our final point, strategy number 10. We've gone through the tactical breaks, the environments, the psychological shifts, but the sources argue that none of it sticks without this final, overarching mindset shift.
Strategy 10 is the deepest realization of all. You are not a machine. You are allowed to have savings of rest.
A machine operates on a binary, right? It's either switched on, producing at maximum capacity on the factory floor, or it is broken and powered off for maintenance.
But humans do not operate on a binary. We operate on a biological spectrum. Look at nature. You do not expect a tree to bear fruit in the dead of winter. The winter is a necessary season of dormancy. The tree's branches look dead and brittle, but underneath, it is drawing its sap down into its roots. It is conserving its energy, surviving the cold, building a foundation so that it has the resources to explode into bloom when the spring comes. If you forced a tree to bear fruit year-round, it would simply die.
You are allowed to have a winter. You are allowed to have a season. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's a whole quarter, where your visible output is lower, where you are focusing on the roots, where you are just maintaining your position rather than aggressively expanding.
And this leads to the core takeaway that grounds this entire deep dive. Master sustainability, and you win the long game. The people who are still at the top of their fields, who are still healthy and thriving 20 years from now, will not be the ones who sprinted the absolute hardest in year one. They will be the ones who mastered the art of pacing themselves.
Master sustainability, and you win the long game. If your value truly doesn't equal the hours you work, and you are biologically meant to have seasons of rest, take a hard look at your calendar right now. Are you acting like a human entering a necessary season of recovery, or are you still pretending to be a machine running in the red? Start your done list today, look back down the mountain, and see just how much you have already conquered.
You've made it this far, so why stop now? There are 2 videos on your screen right now that are perfect for you. Just pick the one that looks most interesting and let's dive back in.